When you take a trip to the Holy Land, there are certain places you're almost guaranteed to see. The Church of the Nativity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Capernaum, Masada. But most trips won't take you here, or here, or here, or here. Each of these is a place where real biblical events actually happened. Jesus touched this stone. David walked through this gate. Demon-possessed pigs jumped off this cliff. And odds are, if you go on a typical trip to Israel, you won't see any of it. So today, I'm going to share with you 5 places you'll likely never see, places that you might never have even heard of. But these are also 5 places that will not only change the way you see the Holy Land, they might also change the way you read the Bible. So join me for this episode of Inside the Holy Land. Now before we start, if you're interested in learning more insights that will help you to understand the Bible more clearly and see it with an entirely new set of eyes, then make sure to click this link above and in the description below where you can download a free book I wrote called 10 Words That Will Change the Way You Read the Bible. It's a quick but powerful read that will teach you a whole lot in just a short period of time, just like this video. Speaking of, let's dive in. Number 1, Kirvet Kaiafa. Almost every trip to the Holy Land will take you to a place called the Valley of Elah. This is the site of where David fought Goliath. As you stand in these fields of this valley in the Shephelah, you can imagine yourself on the battlefield, watching this epic fight unfold. You can look across the highway to the hillside where the Philistines would have encamped. But behind you is an even more amazing spot, a place that will give you an entirely new perspective on this battle, a place called Kirvet Kaiafa. As you hike your way up the hillside of Kirvet Kaiafa, one of the first things you'll notice are the ruins of an ancient gate. And once inside, you can see the casemate wall, which is a double wall where the outside protective wall is separate from the inner city wall, affording a fortress greater protection. As you walk around, you realize you aren't in a mere city, you're in a fortress. But there's something strange about this fortress. As you continue walking through, you eventually reach another gate on the other side of the fortress. This is a rare find. Multiple gates make a city more vulnerable. And yet this second gate reveals something amazing about Kirvet Kaiafa. You see, in 1 Samuel 17, after David defeats Goliath, the Bible tells us that then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Sha'araim to Gath and Ekron. Now, on the surface, this just looks like a summary of events and names of a few locations, until you look closer at the name of one of these locations. Because the name Sha'araim has another meaning. When translated in Hebrew, it means 2 gates. Scholars now agree that the ruins in Kirvet Kaiafa are the remains of the fortress of Sha'araim, the fortress of 2 gates. This was Saul's fortress during the battle with the Philistines, which means that when you're standing at the gate of Sha'araim, looking out over the Valley of Elah, you are very likely standing in the very spot where Saul stood as he watched David slay Goliath. Number 2, the Tabernacle. While most trips to the Holy Land will take you to the desert regions around the Dead Sea, few will take you into the Negev, the desert in the southern part of Israel. And of these that do take you into the Negev, even fewer will take you to Timnah, a site at the very bottom of Israel. But if you were lucky enough to get on such a trip, you would see one of the most amazing sights in all of Israel, a life-size recreation of the Tabernacle. Now, in case you're not familiar with this term, the Tabernacle is a place of worship that the Israelite people would construct both while they were traveling in the wilderness and even once they moved into the Promised Land. They would disassemble it when they had to move from place to place and then erect it once they arrived at their destination. Now, I have to be honest, for much of my life, I didn't really give much attention to the Tabernacle. For me, the Tabernacle was just a temporary structure that the people used before they could build the temple, the real place of worship. But when you look closely at Scripture, you realize that this may not really have been the case. God never actually asks the Israelite people to build a temple, but God gives very clear commands about the tabernacle. And when you see it in person, all sorts of other connections begin to take place. For instance, you notice that there's only one entrance into the tabernacle, one way to get to the presence of God. This portion of the tabernacle was where the tribe of Judah encamped. You had to go through the tribe of Judah to enter into the presence of God. In the same way, Jesus of the tribe of Judah says that he is the way and the truth and the life, and that no one can get to the Father but through him. When you're standing in front of the giant sacrificial altar in the tabernacle, it reminds you of how the first sacrifice in the Bible is in Eden. God sacrifices an animal to cover their sin. And in the same way, Jesus' sacrifice, the final sacrifice, covers us all. In the same spot, you begin to think about how a person who accidentally killed someone could run into the tabernacle and grab the horns of the altar. The family of the victim couldn't kill him here. It was the high priest who would judge him as innocent or guilty. Was it an accident or was it murder? And then you remember how in Hebrews, the writer tells us that Jesus is the high priest. He will judge us as innocent or guilty. And suddenly, this place that you may never have heard of, this place that seemed like just a lot of measurements and instructions in the Bible, comes alive. And you see not only how important it is to the worship of the Jewish people back then, but you can also see all of the connections to Jesus right now. Number 3, corazim. When most people go to Israel, they're eager to see Capernaum, the city where Peter, James, and John lived and the home base of Jesus' ministry. But just up the hill from Capernaum is an equally, if not more exciting city that few people ever visit, Corazim. Corazim is one of the 3 cities that Jesus curses for failing to receive his message. But despite this poor reputation in Scripture, Corazim is an amazing place to immerse yourself in the life of a person hearing Jesus' message in the first century. As you walk up the path from Capernaum to Corazim, you're surrounded by the inspiration of Jesus' parable of the sower. You're walking on a path where no seed can take root. Everywhere you look, there are rocks, poor soil for growth. All around you, there are thorns that will choke out the seed. And rare is the good soil, where something can truly grow. As a community known for its farming, Corazim would have especially resonated with Jesus' parable. As you enter into the town, you can see the remains of first century houses, structures in which families would have dwelled together, where families from Corazim would have arranged marriages for their sons and daughters with families in Capernaum. You quickly get a sense of how connected these communities are. But perhaps the most exciting of all in Capernaum is the synagogue. Certainly one of the synagogues that Matthew was referring to when he said that Jesus went throughout the Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. A synagogue where Jesus preached, and a synagogue where Jesus' message was rejected. But before Jesus entered this synagogue, he would have gone into another important site in Corazim, the mikvah. Before a person could enter the synagogue, he or she would ritually cleanse themselves in a mikvah, a ceremonial bath that was just outside of the synagogue. In Corazim, there are the remains of at least 2 mikvah that can still be accessed today, which means that when you go to Corazim, you can touch the stones that Jesus touched. You can enter the waters that he entered, and you can experience his presence in a way unique from anywhere else in Israel. Number 4, omrit. Just south of Caesarea Philippi, there is a site that few people have ever been to. In fact, most people have never even heard of it. And yet, it may be the site of one of the most important events in the New Testament. It's called omrit. Omrit was a Roman outpost in the northern part of Israel. This was a check-in station, fortified by Herod the Great to control trade and travel out of the Galilee and into other areas of the Roman Empire. In his day, there was significant robbery in this region, and omrit became an essential part of controlling and reducing such crime. If anyone intended to leave Galilee and head north, they had to first check in at omrit. Well, one day, a man from Tarsus was heading north on his way to Damascus. He carried with him letters of arrest intending to persecute the growing Christian population in the region. And before he could set out on the road to Damascus, he would have been required to first stop at omrit. Of course, I'm referring to Saul, the man who would eventually become known as the Apostle Paul. It was on the road to Damascus that he encountered Jesus and went from a persecutor of Christians to the greatest evangelist of the first century. So when you're standing in omrit, you're in the city where Saul made his last stop before meeting Jesus. You're looking out upon the Damascus road that Paul traveled. You're seeing the same land that he saw, smelling the same smells, hearing the same sounds. You're in a place where one of the most significant events in Christian history began. And yet, on most tours, you'll never see it. Number 5, susita. Any trip to the Holy Land is sure to have a visit to the Decapolis, a Gentile region often referred to as the other side in the Gospels. Most of the time, you'll visit a place called Beit Shan, an impressive city that gives you a clear sense of Roman culture around the time of Jesus. But here's the thing. As far as we know, Jesus never visited Beit Shan. He did, however, likely visit another city nearby, Susita, also called Hippos. Susita sits along the coast of the Sea of Galilee and may be the location of one of the most exciting and confusing stories in the Gospels. In Mark 5, Jesus has just crossed the Sea of Galilee and encounters a man possessed by demons. After bowing before Jesus, the demons inside of the man identify themselves as legion and ask to be cast into a herd of pigs. Now, there's all kinds of imagery going on here, and if you'd like to understand what it's all about, you can watch a video I created that explains all of it. You can click the button right here. Now, after Jesus casts the demons into the pigs, Mark tells us that the pigs rush into the sea. And after hearing about this, people in the town are amazed by Jesus and begin to spread word of this miracle. All of these details, the nuances of this story, point to a city like Susita. Susita is situated on a hill above the Sea of Galilee with a steep hill leading down to the water, just like the one described in Mark's Gospel. Burial caves have been found near Susita, just like the ones that Mark says the demon-possessed man was living in. And in the centuries after these events, Susita becomes a thriving Christian community, the consequence of the word that spread after the demon-possessed man was healed. As you stand in Susita, you can see the sea as Jesus saw it that day. You can see the hills that he would have walked as he encountered this man, gaze upon where he would have entered and exited his boat before and after this miracle. As you look at the pagan ruins, you can imagine the awkwardness that his disciples felt as they entered this forbidden land. And all of this allows you to read the scriptures in an entirely new way. The story comes to life in ways that it never did before. And it's all possible by visiting a place that's sitting right there, waiting to be explored. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't done so already, make sure to download my free book, 10 Words That Will Change the Way You Read the Bible. You can find the link up here or down in the description. And if you'd like to see another video that will change the way you see the Holy Land, click this box right here. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.